Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this important discussion about date label myths and what to do about them. My name is Haley Everett, and I'm from Food Mesh, a social enterprise based in Vancouver on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, dedicated to reducing food waste across Canada. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded. Translated captions are available for you to follow this session in the language of your choice. And if you have questions for our speakers, please submit them at any time via the Q&A feature. Households in Canada generate approximately 2.3 million tons of avoidable food waste each year. Best before dates are one of the reasons why food is wasted. Every year, millions of Canadians throw out perfectly good food just because it's past its best before date. Love Food, Hate Waste is on a mission to help Canadians understand the true meaning of best before dates. Here to tell us about their latest research on how best before dates are fueling the food waste crisis in Canada is Second Harvest. With us today, we have Melissa Lamb and Monica Cheyne, two registered dietitians leading Second Harvest's training and education team. Melissa and Monica, I'll pass the floor to you to begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Haley. I just want to say before we jump in, I know it's a little confusing. It's showing that Melissa's speaking, but we're in the same room, so sorry if that causes a little bit of confusion on the Zoom call. But yeah, we're so happy to have everyone here to join us for this presentation. So, as Haley mentioned, my name is Monica. I'm the training and education coordinator with Second Harvest, and I'm joined with Melissa, who is our training and education manager, who will be leading you in your presentation today after I do our little introduction on Second Harvest. So let's just kind of jump right into it. Okay, so just our agenda for the day. Like I mentioned, I'll start with a little introduction to Second Harvest, who we are, what it is that we do, and then we'll do a bit of a deep dive into the avoidable crisis of food waste in Canada and what we can do to reduce our own food waste, specifically through food date labels. So we'll start with a little bit of a background on food waste in Canada overall. So in 2019, Second Harvest released our first groundbreaking research report called The Avoidable Crisis of Food Waste. Before this, there wasn't really any big research out there about what food waste looks like in Canada. So we released that report, and then just in 2024, we released an update to that report as well. So to do this research, we worked with members all across the food supply chain, and we worked with them to kind of determine the amount of food that was being lost and wasted each year in Canada. So we're just going to go through some of the more surprising and impactful numbers that we pulled from this research. So it turns out that 46.5%, or nearly half of the food produced in Canada, is either lost or wasted every single year. Now, with this food waste, there's actually two types. So one of the types is unavoidable food waste. So this is food byproducts, things that we can't really eat. So think of like your chicken bones, or things that are lost when food is naturally cooked and processed. So that one we can't really avoid or have any control over. The second type is avoidable food waste. So this is waste that includes foods that at some point in their lifespan were edible and that were perfectly good to eat, including even when food is being disposed. So that's food that we are able to control and are able to avoid. Now, out of all the food that's wasted in Canada, 41.7% of that is avoidable food waste. So again, nearly half of that. Now, if we were to put a number or a cost to all of this food waste, that food waste is enough to feed 17 million people 3 meals a day, every day for an entire year. And if we were to put a number to that or a dollar amount, it's valued at $58 billion annually to our economy. And finally, just one more stat to throw at you here. In terms of avoidable food waste, 23% of that, which is a pretty significant chunk, is just caused by best before dates or food date labeling. So that's one of the reasons why Second Harvest is such a strong advocate for education surrounding best before dates, because it's such a significant part of our food that's going to waste. Now, it's also worth mentioning as well that all of this waste is happening during an affordability crisis. So approximately 10 million Canadians, so almost a quarter of our population, are experiencing some kind of food insecurity. So they're struggling to access the food that they need, especially to, have a nutritious diet. So this, of course, has deepened our strain and demand that's placed on nonprofits and charitable organizations all across the country. And we hear this all the time from our network of over 4,000 nonprofits all across Canada, that a lot of food ends up being thrown away or even rejected because of this confusion around date labels, specifically best before dates. So we're talking about food that is perfectly edible, that could feed Canadians in need, that's being lost every single day. Now, I want to touch a little bit about climate change because this is an important piece of this conversation, because we know that when food gets sent to landfill, it does have an impact on our environment. In fact, if food waste were a country, it would actually be the third largest producer of greenhouse gases in the world. If we were again to put a little bit of numbers on this, this food waste contributes 21.2 million metric tons of CO2 emissions or carbon emissions every single year. So just to put that into perspective, that's equal to about 250,000 one-way flights from Toronto to Vancouver. So there is also a really great incentive from an environmental perspective to be tackling this food waste within our own households and all across the food industry. Now, another important piece of the conversation when it comes to food waste is not just the actual food that's going to waste, but the resources as well. So think about all the water that's needed to grow food, the amount of gas that's needed to transport the food from the farmer to the grocery store, the amount of energy that's needed to keep the food at the right temperature to be safe to eat, and all the work that people are doing all along the way that's also, going to waste as our food goes to waste as well. So who are we at Second Harvest, and what exactly are we doing about food waste in Canada? So we are Canada's largest food rescue organizations, and essentially what that means is we're connecting with various members all across the food supply chain. So farmers, processors, manufacturers, retailers, and we're collecting this surplus food that's about to go to waste. And this is all perfectly nutritious, healthy, safe food to eat that's being lost for many different reasons. It could be retailing standards, it could be appearance. So we're rescuing that food and we're redistributing it out to nonprofit organizations that need food as part of their programming. So that could be school programs, food banks, shelters, faith-based organizations, kind of all different types of programs going on. So this really ensures that this food that's about to go to waste is feeding our Canadians and not our landfills. Right now, there's a lot of really great work that's happening to donate non-perishable foods. If you've ever been to a food bank, you might have seen a lot of dry goods, pastas, rice, things like that. But at Second Harvest, our focus is primarily on perishable foods. So that's your produce, fresh fruits and vegetables, dairy, meats, all kinds of proteins. And really, we want to focus on this because we know that these foods are more costly for Canadians, especially right now. But also, these foods are really resource intensive and difficult to come by for charitable organizations in terms of keeping them at the right temperature and storing them and transporting them. And these are foods that are necessary to people who are facing food insecurity. These are nutritious foods. So Second Harvest really focuses on these foods in terms of our redistribution because we have the resources to handle that. So all that being said, our mission or our vision is no waste, no hunger. And our mission is to keep food where it belongs, on plates and out of landfills. So now that you know that we rescue food, how exactly do we do that? So we actually have 3 different ways that we facilitate this food rescue and redistribution to reach over 6.5 million Canadians. So the first way is our award-winning app. So you can think of this app almost like a Too Good To Go meets a dating app. Essentially how it works is that if you're a food producer, whether you're a small business or a farm or a manufacturer, you can sign up for our app. And if you have any excess food that is about to go to waste at the end of the day, you can list it out on the app. And then at the same time, nonprofit organizations who need food in their programming can sign up for the app. And then when that excess food becomes available, they get a little ping notification if they're within that geographic circle. And then they can facilitate either picking it up or having it dropped off. So yeah, our app helps kind of facilitate that, and that works all over the country, nationally in Canada. The second way that we facilitate this food rescue is right here from our warehouse in Etobicoke, Ontario. We have our fleet of 17 trucks and 2 vans that are out on the road 7 days a week, picking up excess food and redistributing it and delivering it all across the Greater Toronto area to our nonprofit organization partners. Now, obviously, our trucks cannot get everywhere. So in order to kind of broaden our reach and reach all corners of Canada, we also work with third-party logistics partners who kind of donate their transportation vehicles or where the same thing in cities all across the country. So by plane, by boat, by train, basically any transportation method you can think of, Second Harvest is probably using it to rescue food. And this really allows us to get to the most remote communities in the Arctic Circle and rural communities, all the way east to west, Maritimes, anywhere you can think of. So this slide really is just to show that Second Harvest is really committed right now to expanding our reach all across Canada. Of course, we are still based in Toronto, but we're constantly getting new partners and new food donations all across the country. And our goal is really to reach all Canadians that need that excess food. So when we kind of look back to our avoidable food waste report that I mentioned, if we look at it a little bit closer, we can see that 17% of our avoidable food waste actually occurs in our own households. That's almost 1/5 of all food waste. It's a pretty decent chunk. Obviously, there's food waste that's happening in the supply chain that we can't control, but that 17% is something that we have control over in our own household. And in fact, that's costing us almost $4,000 a year per household. So there is an interest in terms of saving ourselves money and reducing our own food waste at home. So I'm sure for some of us, we've wasted food at home in some capacity. I know I'm guilty of it. We all are at some point in our lives. And there are plenty of reasons why this happens in our households. But some of the most common reasons that we're seeing is things like over-purchasing, so buying too many things that you probably didn't need, not storing our food properly, and lack of food skills. But as I mentioned, a big portion of that food waste is caused by date labeling and misunderstanding or misrepresenting date labels. So that'll lead us nicely into our learning component all about best before dates. So I'm going to pass it over to Melissa, and we'll continue on to our learning component.
There we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa. All right, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit, but okay. So now that you know a little bit about Second Harvest and what we do, and like Monica mentioned, one of the major drivers of the avoidable food waste crisis is best before dates. So almost a quarter of avoidable food waste from processing to purchase is because of best before dates. And we know millions of Canadians are throwing away food because they believe that the best before date is an indicator of food safety and that the food is no longer safe to eat after that date. And because of this, it's actually costing us more than $13 billion in waste each year. So if we can rethink best before dates and see it from a different lens, this can be an enormous, very powerful lever to chipping away the issue of food waste in our country. So with best before dates, though, oftentimes this term gets confused with another term with expiry dates. So I think it's really important to differentiate between the two. So let's learn about that. Okay, so we'll start off with best before dates. So this is the one that you will commonly see on food products. So a best before date tells us how long a food is going to last in terms of taste, freshness, nutritional value, and any other claims that the manufacturer is making on the label. Right? So it is not an indicator of food safety. Right? So, with foods that have a shelf life of less than 90 days, they are required to have a best before date. But if they have a shelf life of more than 90 days, such as shelf stable foods like pastas or dry cereals, they don't need a best before date. But if I were to ask you to open up your pantry right now, or if not, go through the grocery store aisle and pick up some food items, pretty much everything has a best before date. And that's because it's voluntary for manufacturers and retailers to use a best before date. But the key thing about best before date is that best before does not mean bad after. So we can still consume foods after the best before date has passed. The only thing is that it may lose a little bit of taste, a little bit of freshness, and maybe a little bit of nutritional value. So let me give you an example, right? So let's say I have juice, right? And the date on it says today's date, Thursday, October 2nd, right? And so let's say it's tomorrow and now it's October 3rd. So per this definition, we can still consume this juice, right? It's past the best before date. Just the only thing, it may be a little bit less in taste, freshness, and nutritional value. So juice has a lot of vitamin C. So vitamin C is an antioxidant. So naturally, over time, it's going to oxidize. So tomorrow, there just may be a little bit less vitamin C in our juice than what the manufacturer is claiming on the label, right? But so from a food safety perspective, though, it's still completely good to consume. Pending, you'll notice that we've underlined two keywords on this slide, that the product was properly stored and unopened. Right, so pending this juice is properly stored and unopened. As soon as a product is open, then the shelf life of that product may change. So that's best before dates. Okay, so expiry dates. So if Monica wants to help me launch my poll for everybody. So I want everyone to guess how many food items in Canada have an expiry date. So this is a true expiry date. Any guesses? I'll give everyone a few moments to answer the poll. I know some of you may be logged on as groups, and there may be some interesting debates and discussion happening. So I'll give it a few moments. Mm. So waiting for a few more. All right, maybe 5 more seconds and get your answers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see. All right. So most of you said there are 5 food items in Canada that have an expiry date. Well, guess what? You are correct. Good job, everybody. Okay, so yes. So an expiration date, they're usually put on products where it has a really, really strict nutritional composition. So after this date, we discard the item. Okay, so there are 5 products in Canada that have a true expiry date, and these are the 5. So there's nutritional supplements, human milk substitutes, which is infant formula, very low energy foods. So these are foods that need to be prescribed by a physician and given out by a pharmacist. So an example would be OptiFast, which is a really fancy smoothie that's given to patients before they go to surgery. There's meal replacements. So meal replacements are examples like Ensure and Boost, which is what you see at the top right-hand corner. So usually these are given to patients who can't meet all their nutritional needs orally. And so this Ensure or Boost, kind of like a fancy smoothie again, will give them those extra calories and nutrients, right? And then there's also formulated liquid diets. So again, some patients can't meet all their nutritional needs orally by mouth. So they can go to surgery and get a tube inserted directly into their nose and down into their stomach, or can get a tube directly inserted into their stomach. And then the formula that feeds this tube are called formulated liquid diets. So very, very, very generally speaking, the general public, most of us are probably not consuming these foods. But as you can see, the different population groups that do consume these items are very vulnerable, and it's very important for them to meet their nutritional needs, right? So, so for these 5 items, after the date, we want to throw them out. Okay, so now we know that best before dates are not an indicator of food safety. You're probably thinking, well then, how long past the best before date will the foods last for, right? So I have a little game for all of us to play. So we're gonna play together. It's called Taste or Toss. So I'm gonna ask Monica if you can help me launch some poll questions again, right? So there are some food items, and they are past the best before date. Now, I want everyone to take their best guess. This is a safe classroom space, so it's okay if you get the wrong answer. Okay, take your best guess on whether we're supposed to taste this food or toss this food. There's four of them, so make sure you scroll down on the poll and make sure you get all of them. And again, I'll give everyone a few moments to chit chat and think about some of those examples, and then we'll take it up. Great, just a few more, and then I'll take them up. Okay, maybe 5 more seconds. Okay, oh, we're good? Okay. All right, all right. Let's share the results. Okay, so let's see how everyone did. Okay, so we have milk that is 5 days past the best before date. And most of you said this is a taste, right? That is correct. Good job. It is a taste. So for milk, it's actually good for 2 weeks past the best before date. Okay, good job. Next one, we have canned fruits and vegetables, and it is 9 months past the best before date. And it looks like the majority of the group said taste. Okay, good job again. This is also a taste. So canned goods can last for or are good for a year past the best before date. So for specifically for canned goods, this is pending that it's still in good condition, right? So we want to make sure that it is not swelling, not leaking, not rusting. If you see any of those characteristics, toss those out. There's probably something growing inside of it. Um, Specifically for dented cans, if it is a really large dent in the can, throw it out. If there is a dent and it is near the seal, also throw it out. And the reason for that is because with the dent near the seal or a really large dent, it could break the vacuum seal of the can, and which could create a really, really tiny hole, which allows bacteria to potentially go inside and start growing and contaminating the food. And whoever eats that is probably going to get sick. And we don't want that. So throw those out. Okay. Next one, we got tofu that is 3 days past the best before date. Okay. And it looks like the majority of you said taste, right? So good job again. This is a taste. So tofu is good for 1 week past the best before date, right? With tofu, um, if it does smell bad, where usually with tofu, that has a really, really pungent smell after it's like open and it's been exposed to air. If they notice if there's a pungent smell, then definitely throw it out. Okay. And last one, we have some carrots that have gone soft, right? So these are kind of sad looking, they're wilted. Um, and it looks like the majority of the group said taste. Good job again, right? So yes, this one would be a taste. So with carrots, with soft carrots, think of some recipes where generally you would have soft carrots anyways. So things like soups, stews, right? Maybe a carrot muffin. All right, they're going to be soft anyways, right? This is not going to be your carrot that you're going to use as your veggie dip. You're not going to get that good crunch, right? But put them in food where they'd be soft anyways, right? And this is pending that this carrot does not have any mold, it's not rotting, there's not juice coming out of it. This is assuming that this carrot looks perfectly good, but it's just soft, right? Another technique as well with carrots is that if they are soft, or just really any vegetables for that matter, if you get like a cold water in a bowl and you put some vegetables in it, it will actually crispen your vegetables right up just to give it a little bit of texture back. You put it in for about 10 minutes or so, and it works really well. Okay. So, there's certainly a lot of food that's out there, and I don't have time to, unfortunately, to go over all the different types of foods and how long it lasts past the best before date. But I do want to share with all of you a resource that Second Harvest has created in collaboration with Toronto Public Health and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. And it is our best before date timetable. So on this timetable, we have categorized different sorts of foods and how long past the date it can last for. So if you have your phone with you, I welcome you to take out your phone, turn on the camera app, and take a picture of our QR code to get your digital copy. If not, I believe the Food Mesh team will share with everyone later a link. Okay, but feel free to share it with your community and your loved ones and post it up on the fridge and take a look at it next time before you throw food away. All right, but that essentially wraps up our learning component. But just some quick take-home messages. So, best before dates, they tell you the duration of food in terms of taste, freshness, and nutritional value. It is not an indicator of food safety, right? And by storing foods properly, most foods will remain safe to consume past the best before date. Okay. And one last thing, before we end the learning component is that I always like to put this slide at the end of all of our presentations as we go through a lot of content. There's a lot of learning that's happening, but I want to ask everyone to just take a small mental moment and just pick one fact that Monica and I perhaps share with you, or one food waste strategy around food date labeling, and pick one that you feel that you can walk away from today's presentation. And it's very a realistic thing that you can integrate into your life or maybe your community, right? I wanted to highlight again the one statistic that Monica mentioned, that 17% of the avoidable food waste happens at the household level. And so that's all of us here, because we're all food consumers and we're all contributing to that 17%. So if each of us can do one small thing every day within our lives, hopefully we can all chip away on that 17% and lower our food waste together. Okay. But that's essentially all that we have for today. We'll take any questions if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Melissa and Monica. That was great. I do have a few questions that have been rolling in through the Q&A. So for participants, feel free to continue to post your questions in the Q&A, and if we have time, we'll get to them. The first question I have is, if the best before date is voluntary, do we know why almost all manufacturers are choosing to include this on their labels?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I think that consumers want like some sort of date. Like consumers want to know some sort of date of like how to tell when a food is like older or newer compared to another. I think that's something that consumers want, and probably that's why the manufacturers and retailers are catering to what the consumers are asking for. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mhm.
The second question that's come in is, how do expiry dates look different compared to best before dates?
That's a good question as well. So on your food label, they will be written differently. So a best before date should say the words best before, or if you're in like a bilingual, it'll say best before, meilleur, avant, or BB/MA. And if it's an expiry date, it will either say expiry or expired or EXP. Yeah. So that's kind of the best way to go about it. If you see BB or best before, that's best before. Expiry will explicitly say expired or EXP on it. Yeah.
Someone has asked a question about baking. So can you still use milk for the purpose of baking after it's been past the best before date for 2 weeks?
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
I think still we want to emphasize also that the milk still has to be unopened and stored properly. Those are the biggest ones. And also using your senses. So if the milk has smells off, if it's clumpy or just overall does not look good, that's always our best bet. But I guess it depends.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking, but the thing is that, you know, by baking, obviously we mean that it's cooking, which means that whenever food is cooked, we do kill some bacteria, but not all of it. So at least in my opinion, I would kind of treat it the same, whether you were drinking it or baking it. Just because there could still be some bacteria left. I would kind of go off of the general rule of thumb that we mentioned, that if it's been unopened and properly stored, go for that kind of 2 weeks, but also use your senses. So you can also open it and take a smell and take a look. And if it looks fine, maybe try it out.
Yeah, and I think specifically with milk as well, like if has gone bad, like if you pour a little bit in the sink, you'll hear some clumps
Yeah.
coming out, so then we know it's bad, right? So at that point to throw it out. Yeah.
I think your poll inspired a few questions, because now I'm going to ask you one about tofu. So if tofu is in brine and unopened, will it still last a week past its best before date?
Tofu is in brine and it's unopened.
Yes, in brine and unopened. Will it still last a week past its best before date?
A week past its best before date. That one.
Tofu normally lasts a week past best before
Yeah,
date,
usually
right?
it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It
any
usually
best
does.
before date kind of guideline or like timeline that we mentioned. So if we said, oh, milk can last 2 weeks past, or tofu can last 2 weeks past, it's always on the caveat that it's unopened and has been stored properly. So if it's still in its original packaging, and it's been stored in the fridge the entire time that you've had it, then yeah, it can last up to a week.
Yep.
A question about freezing food to extend its shelf life. So if you freeze meat that is close to its best before date, will that extend its life? And if so, how long will it extend its life for?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it will extend its shelf life. I can't remember on the top of my head how long it lasts in the freezer once you freeze it. But if you got a chance to check out our best before date timetable, it will say on there specifically if it's frozen, how long past the best before date then the meat or any other frozen food can last for.
It ranges from 6 months to a year past the best before
Thank
date,
you.
depending on the specific type of meat.
Yeah.
But yes, it is in our timetable.
Yeah.
Because it differs slightly based on the meat. But yes, you can absolutely extend the shelf life.
Yep.
Are there any notable hazards to eating fruit or produce that is breaking down or rotting? So not moldy, but past being ripe.
Not moldy. I guess, yeah, so I think it honestly depends on how it's like stored. Because sometimes even though you may not be able to visibly see the mold with your eyes, it doesn't mean that mold is not there, right? So there certainly is a risk, right? But I would say like use your judgment, right? If it's a very gray area on like how ripe is it that it's almost spoiled, right? So use your best judgment on the food item in terms of whether it's still safe to consume past a certain ripeness. Yeah.
I think too, if you see it visibly rotting, because it's not just mold that causes food to rot and food not to be safe to eat anymore. So if it's visibly rotting and has a foul smell, it's just a good sign that there's some kind of bacteria or something in there that you probably don't want to be.
Yeah. And I think also just emphasizing making sure that we wash our fruits and like produce very well, because if there is something growing in it and we can't see it with our eyes, at least some of it got washed off. Or if it's produce, cooking it can also kill off some of the bacteria as well to minimize our risk.
Kind of related to that, are there some foods that you can eat if they have mold on them, but you cut that mold off?
Yeah. So for hard cheeses, I believe if I remember correctly, the recommendation is to cut off if there's a part of it that's like molding, to about 2 or 3 inches away from the molded piece. So that molded piece to throw it out, but the remainder of the hard cheese, it's still safe to consume.
I think we have time for one more. Are opened pickled items safe for like a longer period of time after the best before date passes? So like for years, for example, after it's been opened, if it's pickled.
So that one's also very tricky as well, because once it's open, because again, it's exposed to the air, so there's always potential for bacterial growth to happen. But because it is pickled, and it is acidic, a lot of like in that environment, there's less bacterial growth, but it's not to say that there's no bacterial growth, right? So maybe not like years and years and years, but probably maybe a little bit longer than some of the other items just because it's an environment where bacterial growth is a little bit slower, but it's still happening though. So I would still be mindful of that product because it is open.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa and Monica. It was a great presentation and some great answers to the questions that rolled in. To our participants, thank you for joining us today. We hope that you found the session to be informative and that it helps you spend more time with your food. Before you leave, we would appreciate it if you could please take a moment to fill out a short poll to help us better understand what you learned from this lesson. We will use this information to help us design future webinars. So I'll just give you a few minutes to do that before wrapping up. As you finish up the poll, I've shared the webinar schedule for the remainder of the series. Registration is open for all of our upcoming webinars, including the next session in the series, which takes place on Wednesday, October 8th. Also upcoming is our Make the Most of Your Food Challenge, which starts on October 18th. This 4-week challenge is designed to help you with even more tips and strategies to spend more time with your food. There are 4 $500 gift card prizes up for grabs, as well as fridge friend units to help you keep the food in your fridge fresh for longer. You can sign up on the Love Food Hate Waste website anytime now until October 17th. Thanks for completing the poll. We'll leave it open for a few minutes for you to finish up your submissions. But in the meantime, if you're looking for more tips and strategies to prevent food waste at home, head over to our lovefoodhatewaste.ca website. You'll find recipes, guides, and resources to help you in your food waste reduction journey. Thank you again so much for joining us, and to our 2 presenters from Second Harvest, Melissa and Monica, for joining us and teaching us today about best before dates and how to conquer some of those myths in our kitchens and use food for the longest period of time possible in order to maintain safety. And we will see you again at our next session. Hopefully, again, that's Wednesday, October 8th next week. Thank you so much, everybody.